Hello survivors and welcome to Tier Death Experience, the first day's Bray show where we rank various aspects of survival horror, in particular Resident Evil. It's going to be another music themed episode, so chaos will ensue. My name is Sai and joining me this time is James aka Moist Owlet.
Hello.
And Sherwin.
Hello.
I feel like I should probably have given you nicer intros because I'm going to need to butter everyone up because this show is always about arguing your point, but probably none more so than when it comes to music, the most subjective thing there is to talk about. So I'm really excited and slightly anxious to do this. The Save Things episode came out really well. People seem to enjoy it. And there's a couple of things in Resident Evil that you always expect a certain piece of music for, and one of them is a final boss. I guess that's probably true of most video games, but it was the logical place to head to next. The only caveat to this one is that we couldn't do every game in the series, otherwise we'd be here until the sort of inevitable heat death of the universe. So instead, we have really truncated everything down to sort of the real mainline titles, your numbered entries, your remakes, and also Code Veronica, because it's quite important. So if this does well, let us know. Maybe we'll do all the other games in a separate list as well.
Just as a caveat right at the beginning, because we
know what your S is, and it's not on here.
Right, there is one track that's not on here, and it should be on here, and I think you all know what it is.
That's all right, Gaiden.
Right. No, it's Resident Evil Outbreak, the Thanatos theme. It's not on here. It would be in top S rank for me if it was. Okay, also, this is the very first episode I've been on where we're discussing music, because I've been very reticent to do it, because of how objective it is. It scares the hell out of me, so, this would be fun.
That's right, Sai and I are old hands at this.
We've done this.
We've done this before. This can only ever go well.
Well, with that being said then, let's start showing with you. Let's start right back at Resident Evil 1, because obviously you did the top 10 tracks for the original Resident Evil 1. So how do you feel about Tyrant Again, the boss theme for the original game?
Okay, so me, this is, if you're me, I'm going to check my notes to make sure I'm correct. Yeah, it's trash. No, this is this is definite A for me. Like, as a nice base point, this straight away is A tier. It's not the best out there, but it's got there's a theme that I think is going to be recurring for a lot of for this, from me anyway, listen to all of these tracks again, which is that a lot of the earlier Resident Evil games, and this is no exception, are really built around it's almost like the boss theme is built around the actual what's actually happening in the actual moment, what's happening in the scene. Like, everything is really reflective of that. For this one, for example, there's this kind of just the instrumentation has kind of, connotations of like slashing sounds, has connotations of kind of, there's a heartbeat in the background, it's erratic, it's kind of got a rising kind of pulse that then kind of is just erratic and darting around all over the place. It's raw molten panic. And I think this is really evocative of what that scene is. It doesn't necessarily try to compete with the scene. It amplifies what's already happening in the scene. It builds into it, and it actually means that there's a lot of presence for what it is. So for that reason alone, this is an A.
I can absolutely see where you're coming from. It depends on sort of your outlook with it, because there's a lot about it that's obviously really good and it fits in the place perfectly, because you're right, it's frantic and it's kind of strange as well. And it sets up loads of classic staples like the big reverberating drums and stuff. But it's one of the ones where, for better or for worse, and again, it depends on your perspective, I don't like listening to this piece of music, which I think is the point. Like, it's not a comfortable listen remotely. It's whirring and nauseous and just nasty. It's not pleasant at all. So it's weird, like, because I guess that's the point. So it should rank pretty highly because it's successful in that. It's a little bit repetitive. So I'm hovering A, maybe into B, to be honest, for me. James, how do you feel about this one?
You're the tiebreaker, James.
Yeah, no pressure. First one. Yeah, my cliff notes on this one is like as soon as you listen to this track, there's a foreboding, and that's going to be a thing that's going to happen a lot through this because it's meant to be foreboding. There's a tension, like a ramping tension constantly. I also got a hint, like I don't know how the music did it, but it gave you a feeling of no hope. Like there was a, like the Tyrant is winning and it's going to win, and I felt that while I was listening to this track. Like there was no hope for the character, right? So I think that like makes it even worse if you're playing this, because you're not in a bad way, and it's meant to be that. It's meant to like give you that trepidation there. Though it is missing something. There's like, I don't know what it is. I'm not sure what it is, and I think it might be because of the limitation of the technology back then, maybe, right? But there is something missing. I will go into it later on with another track that's very similar to this. But for me, I'm similar to you, Sai. I want to put it in high B, but I'm okay in putting it into low A.
I think okay. I think we all agree that's where it lives. And do you know what? Let's put it in high B for the moment. Yeah, I can happily earn like bonus points for later on. Yeah, I'll hold you all to this.
It always changes. It always changes every time.
Yeah, exactly.
You do the redo.
This is like A minus B plus territory, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm glad that we can all land on that one, because this is one of the ones that immediately, like right out of the gate, the first one you're like, this is weird and a very odd place to start. So I wonder how it's going to go down. But yeah, I think that's good. That sets a good precedent. Let's see if we can stick to being this diplomatic. Big departure now from that sort of whirring nonsense noise into something a bit more traditionally cinematic. It's going to sort of probably set the stage for a lot of the rest of what's to come in that sense. Is Third Malformation from Resident Evil 2 1998. For me, this goes in as an instant S rank. I'm just going to say that now. And I know that is nostalgia blind, absolutely.
I don't think it is, because I think you might be surprised.
Okay, I'm glad. But that's the thing. I know it's nostalgia blind, but I also know it's really good. I know it's real good. It's undeniably good. It's got this lumbering melody rhythm to it, which is kind of like the Tyrant battle from RE1, so it has that in common, even though it's a wildly different beast musically, and the fact that you're facing a giant, blob mouth thing. It's in your face. It's got the horns. It's got the choir. It gets so much more out of the PlayStation 1 compared to RE1. It really shows how much that console's potential grew in just 2 years. It's a classic for me. James, how do you feel about Third Malformation?
My first note for it was, this is a boss theme. This is what I would expect from a boss theme. It's so bombastic and huge, and like it's orchestral and powerful, and it reminds me of Parasite Eve as well. When I was listening to it, I got, this would fit right into the beginning of Parasite Eve. Which I thought was kind of cool. It gives. I'm going to talk about the feelings it gives me when I listen to it, because I thought that was important. Later on, I'll talk about the gameplay of certain games as well that I've been a part of, because I think that's valid of me to kind of miss out on the stuff I haven't played. But when I listen to this stuff, this music, it gave me like a sense of time is running away from me. Like it's just running away, and I can't and it makes sense, because the end of this thing is gonna get you. Like if you don't, if you don't kill it, it's going to get you eventually. There is no running away, so you got a narrow battlefield there. Yeah, and for me, it's a high A to S for me, just because it's such a strong track. Like there's so much happening, and it's in a great way. Like later on, there'll be examples where that is done badly. There is so much in a song where it's done badly, but they did such a great job with the arrangement with this track.
Yes, 100% agree with what you're saying about the arrangement. Yeah, it's with especially like these bombastic, and this one's quite a bright bombastic theme. Very easy to make that too busy and into a mess. But this is it's very clear. Sherwin, how do you feel about Third Malformation?
So, pluses. It is big. It's got so much presence to it. Like it slams down, and then immediately it's just exactly what you said. There's so much. You can tell the extra instrumentation here, the extra presence, the raw. It's just a big track, and I think that's the easiest way of saying it. And the style, it's got that very, for me anyway, the instrumentation is very Japanese. It's got that very imperialistic Japanese kind of vibe to it in the background, which is kind of fun. And I'm glad you said lumbering. My actual cliff notes are it's pompous, which isn't necessarily too far, which is kind of a nice segue into why I think this is a solid beat here.
Okay. Wow.
One last thing which I like, and I dislike in equal measure, I think the opera notes or the vocals really do a good job of being evocative of like this wild, unrestrained kind of G-virus coursing through William Birkin's body and kind of, wailing away and this uncontrollable thing. The problem is they are so insanely jarring and distracting from the whole thing. They really do, just for me, just tear me straight out of the scene completely. Resident Evil 2 is very, very guilty of this. The gameplay and the tracks where you are wandering around, creeping around the police station or wherever your location of choice is, trying to trying to kill enemies or avoid getting attacked, that sort of stuff. Those are the best parts of the game. The boss fights are the weakest, and exactly the same is true of these themes. Like, it does feel big, it does have a lot of presence to it, but it doesn't really feel like it doesn't really feel at all in any way connected to what's actually happening in the actual scene. The same way as I just talked about the erratic heartbeat, the kind of distortion, the uncomfortable feeling on the helipad against the Tyrant. This just feels like it's a big old thing blasting through some speakers while you're running away from this big mutant monster dog thing. So yeah, the opera vocals are really distracting. I think it is big and it is pompous and it is cumbersome, and I don't necessarily know that accurately conveys the urgency of what it is. So it's not the worst by a country mile, but I also find it's not a good example of boss music, I don't think.
Interesting. Okay.
And there's your first show in Curveball of the year. I that at all.
Genuinely wasn't expecting that. So I guess by, law of the way that we sort of all personally voted, does that make it land in an A then? Because we were very positive,
now,
so...
Yeah, I think an A, I think that A rank is going to move around a lot.
Yeah, these things are always like these are the early kind of start for tens, and then negotiation really happens.
Yeah. You'll see as well. That's the first icon of many that all just kind of look the same. Like, I tried to make them identifiable. Like the logo, the text is very clear because most of these are just giant, more blob things. So getting on to the next one is another giant blob, the eventual final form of the Leather Daddy himself, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis' track Final Metamorphosis. I am very high on this, but I'm not going to go first. Sherwin, actually, I'm going to bounce to you for this one. How do you feel about Resident Evil 3's final boss theme?
This is by a country mile the best one of the group. It's insane. Like, yeah, there's the nod. Like this, this is the end of a game. This is how you do a boss fight. Like, it feels so in keeping with what the moment is. Like, there's desperation in there. There's a militaristic theme to it, which fits really, really well with the fact that the missile is streaking towards you, and obviously you also have kind of the UBCS mercenary kind of vibe going on with RE3. It is big and bold and exciting. It's got such an urgency to it. It just feels like it's the end. It's your final mission. Like, I'm playing this. It's like, okay, this is literally it. Like, this is the culmination of this entire game, is me doing this one thing. And this is literally it. Yeah. And again, the vocals don't feel jarring here. This just feels very, very solid, wonderfully built in. I can't exactly like you said, I can't be higher on this track. This is S tier straight away for me.
Good. I'm glad. Yes, I have this written as like S plus because it has to be really close to the top for me. Yeah. I don't have as much nostalgia for Resident Evil 3 as I do for RE2. Said that many times. But when this kicks in, it feels exactly like it. if Resident Evil 3 was a movie, like it feels like an action movie ending, and as you said, like desperation and stuff like that. This to me says, I'm not sure if it's you can do it. It feels more like do it or die. Like this is it now. This is your literal last chance for escape. It has Nemesis's sort of, I don't know what you call it, sort of like throbbing noise in the background, whatever that weird sort of pulse is. But you're right, there's so much more to it. It's not just Nemesis's theme. This is the theme of sort of like the last possible chance of escape from Raccoon City. There's just so much going on. Now, just when it kicks in, it's undeniable. Every time those few notes kick in, you're like, yeah, this is it. James, how do you feel about this one?
So I spoke earlier on about RE1 having something missing, and like this track puts that missing thing in. I don't know what it might be. The heartbeat.
It might be like I tell you what, RE1 doesn't really have like a strong melody whatsoever to it, whereas this, like the melody punches you right in the face when it kicks in.
Yeah, it's very good. Like they tried, like they could have just carried on with RE2 and gone for the big bombastic track. Right, but they settled down, right, and they kind of looked at I felt like they looked at the game with this score, and they thought, you're being chased throughout this entire game, and this track feels like you've got to the end of that chase, but you're still being pursued. I think wrongly, I did rank this pretty low, but I think that was mainly because there were other things that I would rank higher, but listening to you two, like, has made me think like it does deserve to be higher because it fits the game perfectly, and it fits the scene perfectly. So yeah, it is high S for me, and since
yeah, I think it's got. I tell you what, it's actually a better piece of music than the boss fight even deserves. Considering it's just hit a few switches, it's like.
Do you know? I think the best way of describing this is the sound of like someone's last stand. Don't know if it's Jill, don't know if it's Nemesis, don't know if it's Raccoon City, but something is last stand, and it just kicks in. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't listen to this gets like adrenaline shot and says, "Right, game time, guys. Let's go do this thing."
Absolutely. Okay, cool. The next one on the list, Resident Evil Code Veronica, Alexia Type 2. So this is one I've talked about extensively, so I'm definitely going to go last with this because I did the Code Veronica top 10. Now that's what I call survival horror. James, how do you feel about Alexia Type 2? So it's a big one.
It's S rank for me.
Nice.
Immediately, it's epic. The piano, is absolutely banging. People don't, I imagine piano players probably don't hear that word often when it comes to piano, right? But it's strange to say, but it feels the most Resident Evil. There's a hook that's constantly being played over, and if that hook is like it feels like a chase, and it feels like that feels almost like a heartbeat in itself. I think that's meant to be the pulse. Is that violin that's going off to remind you. And then everything else is kind of going off, and it feels like I like music where you can tell where the music is coming from. I don't like it when it's, I don't like it where it's all kind of mishmash. I could tell every single instrument that was played in this track.
Yeah. Right.
And it was done, the arrangement was done so well. I really like this boss fight too. Right. So it's I'm also quite biased. It feels like the end of things, whether that be the end of Alexia or the end of you. It depends on how your game ended and you quit, right? But yeah, I don't really have much more to say because I just immediately, when I heard this, right, I was like, that's that track that I loved. That made me so hype during that boss fight. That made me love the boss fight even more. That made me look at her and see how amazing she was as a BOW as well. I'm going to talk about it later on, but a lot of these tracks, they even make or break a boss fight. And I think this really elevated an already cool boss fight.
Mm. Sharon, you joined me for the discussion of the Code Veronica soundtrack. Where would you rank Alexia Type 2?
Much like James on the last one, I have this. My Cliff Notes has this as a C. I think it's probably perhaps a touch better. Also thinking about some of the other stuff that I've listened to, it's for me this is overbearing. I get exactly where you're coming from. It does feel like the end of things. It does have that urgency to it. Is it a little bit of the vocals again? Yes, and that's not helped by the fact that the type of boss kind of for me this is such a big track in terms of the actual presence of it. It actually detracts away from the urgent. If I think of this particular boss fight, the first thing I think of is the music, and not in a good way, not in a like, oh god, that was so cool, I love how much pressure I felt. More like, is she wailing away singing while I'm fighting her, kind of thing. Like, it's almost, it's almost got, it's got that to it. And the thing is, I think so many elements of what this track are better represented elsewhere on the Code Veronica soundtrack. If you were to listen to the Code Veronica, like the military snare, that's sort of a vague hint in this, that's better used in the military bass tracks and so on. Like the piano is better placed elsewhere. Like I do get where you're coming from. For me, I just struggle with this one for it not to feel overpowering for that particular scene. But then the flip side to that is it doesn't feel disconnected as some of the others. So purely based on this on its own, I think if we're just reviewing the Code Veronica soundtrack, this is no down for me. This is not one of the better tracks for a few different reasons. If we're looking at with this group of particular tracks, it's perhaps probably more middle of the road. So I'm happy to shoot to B, as a kind of compromise, after listening to you, James. But I'm not sure I can put it up there higher than that.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. It's funny because I sort of absolutely sit on both sides of the fence in a way, because when I was doing, I'm sort of going to reiterate this, I've talked about it before, but when I was ranking those top 10 tracks for the Code Veronica soundtrack, I was like, yeah, it's okay. It's a bit, maybe it's a bit much. It's a bit crazy, right? But the more I listened to it, it just started shooting further and further up. And the reason for that being that, as you said, Sherwin, there are like elements in it from all over the game that just come together. And James is sort of what you were saying with like that sort of chase sequence piece of music that occurs earlier in the game. There's a bunch of melodies that just sort of weave through, and it does feel like the Redfields versus the Ashfords in musical form. There's a lot of like question and answer and battling melodies and stuff like that. Sweeping, much like Code Veronica is, and it's just different enough to stand out from everything that's come before. It's a little bit similar to RE2's, but just like, it's just more in the way that Code Veronica is. I had this down as an A, so I guess maybe top of B is the logical position right now. Is that probably fair?
Oh, can't hear you, James. You're muted, I think.
Oh, put it in top B. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Just swearing at the screen.
How dare you!
Okay, so let's return to Resident Evil 1. Since we're doing this all in release order, we now have what is now called Remake 1. Used to just be called Remake. And the track, I believe, is called Tyrant 2. So for me, this is going to be a really interesting discussion, I think, because we're not just ranking it with everything else, we're also ranking it with the version that came before. So there are, again, various sort of perspectives to come at this from. Is this just a modern version of what came before? Does that make it better? Does that make it worse? Sherwin, how do you feel about the sort of reinterpretation of this?
I knew you'd come to me. It's like, hello, old school tracks, old school man, what do you think?
I'm afraid of what my opinion even is. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm trying to... I need to hear some wise words.
Okay. I'll shoot for this one. So this for me is high A. It doesn't reach the same levels as what Nemesis does, but it is probably the best of the rest. Actually, no, it's not the best of the rest, but it's very close to. So I think this one, exactly as you said, it amplifies, it works on top of, it's effectively a reimagining of the first original Resident Evil 1 track. And I think it, it has the heartbeat, but it's erratic. It has those jagged scratches, those kind of screams of like, that are evocative of like the swiping blade scraping across the ground that, I don't know about you, but I immediately heard in my head as soon as I said those words. Kind of, it's got that kind of build, that rising crescendo, that erratic kind of nature to it. This really does feel like you are just terrified and you are running and trying not to get killed in the most wonderful way. I think more than perhaps, unless with exception of Nemesis, I think more than all the rest of these tracks here, this one really, really, really fits the game. Like, and it's clear, I imagine, that people knew what, when they actually came to make this game, whoever the composer is, and apologies, I don't have that to hand, but they clearly sat there and went, well, we know we're making this, we know what that scene's going to look like, so let's make a piece of music that is evocative of that. It's a known entity. It's not like one of those things where they made the music because someone needs some boss music, but they have no idea what that boss fight's actually going to look like. There was a very clear vision of, okay, they're on a helipad, they're running away from this giant thing that's trying to murder them with a huge spike hand. So I think so much of this really, really does kind of fit, and it almost feels like it just matches the Tyrant so very well. There's just this terrifying, impossibly incomprehensible creature in front of you. It's too big. It's this aberration of science and nature together that shouldn't exist, and it's just the sound of raw terror.
Nice. Okay, James, we're going to go to you next. How do you feel about Remake's final boss?
Coward. I love this. I love this track. Again, I'm going to go back to the original again. I'm going to use the original as a baseline a lot because I feel like there was stuff missing for me, right? Mm-hmm. And there were bits in this show, and you described it, and it was the I think it was keyboard maybe or just high strings, but they kind of like dance around, and it feels like a spider is moving across the score, like when it happens, and it's really terrifying. Like normally nowadays you would hear like the whirring high string of like violins as a way of, it's in bloody everything now, right? And it's very annoying, but this, you don't hear that in stuff, like, and I think that's very original, with Remake. There's definitely a theme of there just being no hope, you have no chance here, like everything's over. It's highly strung, it's incredibly tense and thrilling. Where do I rate it, though? Because I'm looking at the rest. This is where it gets complicated. I've put down, but as I talk about it, it changes, you see. But I put it at high B, low A, but I think it deserves a little bit higher.
Interesting.
But I really like RE2, so I think it deserves to be below RE2. But that might change later on.
See, this is why I wanted to hear you guys' takes, because you've talked me around to it a little bit. But you know what? I think that it's actually, I think the original version is just pips it slightly, because there's just something so weird and other about the original version of the boss theme that when you transcribe it perhaps to more traditional instruments, and you're right, it absolutely does some original things with those instruments and stuff. But it kind of loses a bit of its sort of strange alien nature for me, which is a shame. It's definitely a negative of it. But beyond that, I mean, all your points are absolutely salient. I don't know personally if I would say it's in the A, but I mean, by democracy's sake, I think it's going to end up there, at least for now. But yeah, I don't know. When I think of the Tyrant boss fight, it's the original one that comes to mind for me.
Well,
so
I hear
we go bottom of A?
I hear put it in A and put the RE1 original in A as well. Good job done.
I don't hear that. Nobody said that.
Not yet. Not yet. There's always time, but not yet.
Okay, cool. So our next entry will take us to the events just preceding Remake with Resident Evil Zero's final boss, which is called Escape. This one, I'm going to go first. I'm going to drop a... I don't know if it's a hot take or not. This is really not good. This is bad. It's functional, but it's forgettable. And, I mean, to be fair, it suits the title of Escape, because it does feel like your classic Resident Evil panic runaway music. But it doesn't feel like a final boss fight at all. It doesn't set itself apart much, which is a shame, because the Queen Leech as a monster is really, really weird. And Resident Evil Zero is pretty weird. Like, it's got jazz flutes and some bloke up on a mountain singing opera and stuff. But this track's just very run-of-the-mill. It's like there's so much you could have done and so much I kind of expected. It's just, both the boss and its music just kind of like very mid. So this might even be a D rank. I don't know if it's a disaster, D for disaster as it seems to go these days, but maybe. I don't think there's many on here that are definitely worse than this. James, you're shooting some thumbs up. How do you feel about Escape from Zero?
It's uninspired.
Yeah.
When you compare it to the ones that came before, that's how I was looking at this. I was looking at this and going, someone looked at the other tracks and said, let's just make these other tracks boring. Let's make a track that's just boring. There's like
that's what we need to do. Just one of them.
Yeah, it's like 3 instruments. One of them you hear very rarely. It's not really doing much. It doesn't add anything to the boss fight either. Whereas the previous ones have added at least something to a boss fight. And it might be the music might be the reason that the end of RE0 is so forgettable for me. Because as I was saying earlier on, a piece of music can elevate or devalue something, and this one definitely devalued it because it was just a boring track. I didn't feel any sense of like foreboding or attention or anything when I was listening to it. I was just bored. I literally listened to about 30-40 seconds of it, and I just skipped to the next one because I was just like, okay, I know exactly what my opinion is about this.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, good. I'm glad. Sherwin, how do you feel about Escape? Are you going to wow us now and say it's an S?
No, I'm really not. This is solid D tier material. I actually wish there was an E tier to put stuff like this in there. This is basically, it's just my I've got 2 notes. One of which is this is just standard issue boss music. Is the only way to describe it. It's not evocative of the game. It's not terribly interesting. It just fits. Like it's almost like someone just went into do you know like how you listen to some like wrestling intros and it's like, oh, they just had generic nu metal track. That's pretty much this. This is generic boss music track. Like like they had a catalogue of it, and out came Hardcore Holly. It's just what it is, and so that's that. And I think also the other thing is, considering the absolutely brilliant stuff that this soundtrack does for RE0, this is so poor by comparison, because RE0's soundtrack is genuinely probably the most terrifying Resident Evil soundtrack there is. It is strange noises, it is scary, it's in your head, it makes you just not want to leave your house after listening to it in case you get attacked by something, and probably sleep with the lights on. And this by comparison is the thing that puts you to sleep and means you can actually have dreams. So
it's literally brown noise.
It's Resident Evil boss music by the numbers. You're going in D, absolutely. Good. I'm glad. Okay, cool. It's going to be an interesting shift away now because we've done a bunch of the classic sort of styles of games. Resident Evil 4 shift in gameplay, shift in audio as well. The final battle for Resident Evil 4 is just called Final Battle. James, how do you feel about the end of Resident Evil 4 soundtrack-wise?
It's fine.
Fine.
Like, so I'm gonna... Yeah, it was too much. There was too many change-ups in this track. I have it running in the background right now, actually. Let me just turn that off. There were too many change-ups. It was constantly throwing me off because of the change. Do you know what it felt? It felt like a 5-act play. And I don't know if that was too much because there's too many things happening, like at once for me. I remember listening to it and go, I don't recognize this track.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember it. I couldn't it wasn't memorable. So, because of that, I want to put it in C because it wasn't memorable. Mm-hmm. These final boss fights are so key because you need to remember them. The ones that I hear them on here and immediately I go, oh yeah, I remember this. This is freaking amazing, and I remember the moments and here's my gamer memories activating, this one doesn't. But then again, the Sadler fight of RE4 is not its best part.
Sure.
So it's C tier for me.
Yeah, I land exactly in the right spot, really. I don't have much deep attachment to the original Resident or Evil 4 anyway, so that doesn't help. But I could not think of what the boss fight theme for this game was at all before I put it on when I was putting this together. No idea. And honestly, I'm not surprised listening back to it. It doesn't have anything that particularly stands out. I think as a sort of swarm of noise and sort of a constant beat of percussion, it does fit in with RE4's soundtrack in that way, because that is kind of the thing that it goes for, and we talked about that. Kelsey and I had a very enlightening conversation about the soundtrack when we did Now That's What I Call Survival Horror about it. It was really interesting to do. It's still a pretty meh soundtrack overall for me. Just very forgettable. Fits the game, but very forgettable, so it's not going to rank very well with some of the top tier stuff for me in here. Sherwin, how do you feel about it? Because I'm also C gang.
Yeah, I've got... Yeah, checks notes, comes back. Yeah, I've got high C, low B at most. Plot positives. This does fit... Weirdly, this does actually, for many reasons, fit the actual game quite well, which I like. I have a very... I should stress, I have a very love-hate relationship with this track. Things I love about it. It does fit the boss fight. It's got a big cinematic intro. It feels big. It feels bombastic. That's cool. Like that. It's got the crashing water on the on like below you. It's got the big ponderous steps of this creature moving around the platform. That's cool. It's got kind of like a cult kind of hint of the sort of vocals and voice bits in there, like sort of echoing through. Love that stuff. That's fantastic. But it sounds like 3 different tracks glued together. And it doesn't ever find its feet. It's like it doesn't get locked into a groove at all as it goes through. Like it's and not like in RE1 or even RE where either one of them actually, where they don't really find their groove, but that's because they're not trying to find a groove. They're just trying to be terrifying. They're just trying to scare you because you're fighting a boss. This thing is like, it's got musicality to it, but it doesn't really find it doesn't give you a sense of discordance in a scary way. Like, I can't possibly ground myself, and that's exactly what I want to have as an energy, because I'm fighting a massive boss and I'm scared and I don't know what to do. It just doesn't ever. It's almost like it's a piece of music that just doesn't ever hit that part that you can kind of find yourself going, okay, that was pretty cool, that sounded great. It just never finds that. So yeah, I agree. I'm with you both. This is a C. I don't think it really works.
It might even go lower, to be honest.
Maybe.
I don't know. I want to put it in that scrub tier, but it's. I said there's a lot. There are things about this that I quite like. There's nothing to like about RE0 by comparison.
It's all right. I think RE0 might have some company soon enough. So, but we'll get there. Okay, so following on from that, logically, of course, we have Resident Evil 5 and the track Deep Ambition. This one's an interesting one because it's good cinematic movie stuff, which is what it wants to be. It's the first of our sort of Batman tracks here. This is the sort of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin version of the cinema world. The problem with it, even for its good moments for me, and this is what we were saying sort of earlier a little bit about how does it rank with what we've got, and also in the context of the soundtrack, is there are better tracks on RE5. Like literally just before this, the previous fight with Wesker, Winds of Madness, is a much better boss fight theme. That's the one that people tend to remember more. So I don't think it's good enough to represent that ultimate showdown that it needs to be between Chris and Wesker in a volcano at the end of Resident Evil 5 after all these years of build-up, for all of its ridiculousness. It's just kind of a good piece of film score, which is what it's meant to be. But I don't think it's not really going to go toe-to-toe with some of the early stuff that we talked about. It's just sort of, it's not bad, but it's serviceable. Sherwin, how do you feel about Deep Ambition?
Okay, I love this.
Oh, awesome!
I love this. This for me is S tier, except for the fact that I come around to it and it just isn't Resident Evil boss music. And that's the only way to describe it. It is clever, it's articulate, it has a fantastic storytelling range. It does sound, Hollywood is exactly what I wrote down. It's just super fun, super fun. You're just listening to it, and it could apply to so many different things. It's cool. It actually makes me think of Indiana Jones on a massive scale. This is an Indiana Jones movie to the soundtrack. It's very John Williams. It's so cool. I love this piece of music. But there is a big point, which is that A, is this Resident Evil, and B, is this a boss fight? I think it's definitely a really slapping boss action scene.
Yeah.
So I'm amazed I used the word slapping there, but it is. It's an astonishingly good action scene piece of music, and that could be applied to a boss fight, I guess. But I just don't think it's Resident Evil. But then Resident Evil 5 isn't Resident Evil, so I'm not really in the same way. I'm not really that sort of invested in that sense anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. For me, I put this in an A as my notes because I really like it, and I can't justify putting it into an S because I don't think it's a piece of exceptional music, but not in the right company.
Okay,
really good example. This is like the really popular kid in school dyeing his hair black and then wearing some eyeliner and turning out to like an emo gig or something. Yeah, it's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, somehow snuck into this little room full of miscreants that we're talking about. Yeah, I see what you're saying,
super good looking. It doesn't quite really fit with everybody else because they're all just sitting there, just being who they are, and there's one guy's trying really hard to fit in, but you're like, you are far too clean cut for the rest of us.
James, how do you feel about Resident Evil 5's final boss theme?
I love this track. In fact, one of my notes is, and here's your Alien reference. Okay, did James Horner write this? Because it sounds exactly like the escape theme in Aliens. There's the really crescendoing, I think a trumpet maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know my musical instruments, but It felt like an escape, but also so blockbuster. It was well put together too. We have perfect examples of ones that are huge orchestral, kind of bombastic blockbuster tracks just not working. But I think this works very, very well. I remember I played this with Steve, and I remember this track coming on. And I remember feeling very empowered, which was, but at the same time, when the trilling flutes came on and the violin solos came in as well, it brought back that tension again for me. I really think it's a fantastic track, so I'd put it in a high A, low S.
Oh, me. Wow, okay. Do you know what, though? To be fair, your arguments are well made, and I think Resident Evil 4 obviously headed in that Hollywood direction a little bit, but Resident Evil 5 really realised it. It is an action movie game. So you're right, both of you, it totally fits with what they're trying to achieve. So I'll give it that, even if this particular track isn't necessarily my favourite. So I had it written down as a C. So I don't know where does this go? Bottom of A for now? Top of B?
I think works, given that James and I both struggle with this, perhaps even being possibly an S, maybe, and then we can argue around from there.
Okay. No, I'm so looking forward to that. Okay, let's continue with the Hollywoodization of Resident Evil with Resident Evil 6. final boss theme we have selected. So obviously with Resident Evil 6 there's 4 different campaigns. So there was some debate on how necessarily we're going to approach that. Logic sort of won through that the best way to do it is that when the game originally came out, you had to unlock Ada's campaign. So ergo, the actual final boss of the game that you would play on launch is part of Ada's campaign. So maybe we'll talk about the other ones if there is a sequel video to this. But for now, the final boss theme we're talking about is Joint Struggle. This is the second Batman theme on our list today. This one is the Dark Knight version, absolutely. I don't know if that's something that everyone just points and laughs at every time, but I cannot unhear it every time I play this
I was going to say Spider-Man.
Also good, yeah, for sure. James, how do you feel about Joint Struggle?
I think this is the most memorable thing out of RE6 for me. The entire game.
You might be right, I think it is.
I spent tens of hours playing RE6 with Steve, and I did not enjoy really very much of it. But the music is quite good. Of course I'm going to like this music because I like the last track. And I love these huge spectacle tracks. Like they're really memorable. Like they always have like a hook in them that I'm like, yes, I love that bit of the music. And I'll hear that again. I'm like, yes, I keep that going. It's it's a centerpiece. And it's I absolutely love it. And it kind of it's like the Spider-Man, Batman kind of hook comes in, and then everything else is a support for that moment, which is really neat. I like that. I love it. So I'm going to stick it in high A, low S again.
Nice. So for me, this actually, I prefer this over RE5s, absolutely. So I have to take that into account considering the position we have RE5 right now. But I had this as a B compared to Deep Ambition's C. I really like the melody, the RE6 sort of main melody that comes in and out, and it's like got a prominent placement in this track. As you say, it's very memorable. Like it weaves in and out throughout the soundtrack, so obviously that helps. But it takes pride of place here, and even just like other parts of this is also memory, like the da 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 like rhythm, also super all over the place with Resident Evil 6, so very memorable. I think this is one of the best. Resident Evil 6's soundtrack is a weird thing. It's a weird beast that we've not had the opportunity to talk about in any fashion yet, because it's like Resident Evil 6 itself. It's a lot to sink your teeth into, but this might be one of the best tracks on the soundtrack when you talk about standalone pieces of music. Is it just riffing on other tracks throughout the soundtrack? Possibly. Just sort of using lots of stuff throughout that grand tapestry. But as a boss fight, it sounds great. Yeah, gets you pumped. I'm all about this one. Sherwin, how do you feel about Joint Struggle?
This was a C, maybe low C, D for me.
Okay.
It's interesting you guys talk about. Like, I also went movie with this. Like, it's Hollywood, exactly as you say. I didn't do it. I don't really watch superhero movies, but my first thing is, am I on a boat? This is Pirates of the Caribbean or Master and Commander. like literally. Yeah. So I was like, I'm on a boat, and at some point it switches to James Bond, which kind of fits to Ada. Yeah, it's just. It suffers from exactly the same. For me, this suffers from the same thing as what RE. It's a little bit like a cross between RE5 and RE0 in the sense that it's standard issue boss music to start with, but I don't think it's standard issue boss music for a Resident Evil game, or even a horror game. I think it's just like this could be from like a Disney boss fight. Like it's so all over that I just don't think there's anything scary about it. There's just nothing that really makes me, but it's also nowhere near as clever or intelligent as what RE5's music is. The reason why I liked RE5 so much is I listened to it and that's really clever storytelling in this. Like it's evocative. Like I can see the different movements. I can hear lots of different language, lots of conversations coming from this thing. It's clever in the way it builds and it moves and it progresses and changes everything around. This just doesn't have that. It just feels quite dull by comparison.
Okay.
So I don't think it terribly fits Resident Evil, and I think it's quite standard issue for what it is.
To be fair, when it comes to there's no horror in this music. Considering the game it comes from, there's no horror in the game either. So it would be really weird if it suddenly had horror.
That's also fair.
But your point's absolutely well made. Okay, that makes it an interesting prospect of where we're going to put this, because this is quite a wide... We've all pretty much given a widespread of opinion, really, because as I say, I had it at B, which is right in the middle. Sherwin, you said somewhere down the bottom, and James, you were pretty high on this, so where do we put this?
I mean, we can literally go, like, bog standard average and put it at high B for now.
How's that bog standard average? Surely B. Middle of the road B.
B for bog
Middle
standard.
of the B.
Well, we've done all of this. It should be in the absolute middle, if by that logic.
I'm happy to put it in the direct middle. Yeah, well, we can put it there.
Yeah.
I'm going to fight for it later, but...
Yeah, same.
That was me fighting for it.
Okay, cool. Okay, something a little bit different again this time around with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Daidara Bochi. Apparently, the name of this track is a reference to Japanese myth, giants that sort of disguise themselves as mountains, which I guess seems appropriate considering the boss that you're fighting. Unlike other tracks in this list, this is very storyline driven because it's really just made up of 4 parts, like where you advance up to face down with Evelyn, when you face off with Evelyn, when everything sort of explodes around the house, and then the final sort of showdown where you've got, the Albert 01 and all that stuff. So it's made up of sort of like 4 movements. Sherwin, how do you feel about Daidara Bochi?
It's big. It's kind of clever. It's kind of quite articulate in the way it represents itself. It doesn't really resonate with me, if I'm entirely truthful. Like it's very much background sound is the best way to describe it. There's not a lot to love about this. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also nothing that I finished listening to this. I was like, I just can't bother. I just don't care about listening to this again. If I never hear this again in my entire life, I won't. Well, part of the time is like 30 seconds later I've forgotten it anyway, and then later on it just, and that's okay. Like, it's some of these tracks, like for example, we're going to see a couple others later on, but certainly Code Veronica is competing for what's happening on the screen, like to the point where I remember actually, I vaguely remember actually turning it down because it was just so overbearing in terms of what's happening there. Whereas this, by comparison, is so low key, and I'm there for low key. Again, works very well for Resident Evil 0 soundtrack, but it's so low key, but it almost just like, would you even have a more awesome thing if you battled in complete silence? And it would be really jarring and eerie. Would that even fit better than this? Because it just doesn't do enough to make it feel... There's nothing in there as a stimulus to kind of give me any feeling or any connective tissue to make this feel cool. So for me, this is a C. I'm going to jump in and say that I had this as a D. You're right, like it's functional enough, it's fine, it's inoffensive, but also incredibly forgettable. Like, I love Resident Evil 7 and I didn't remember what this was. And to your point about it, that scene playing out in silence or whatever, perhaps being more interesting, I mean, at least that would fit the rest of the game, because the game barely has a soundtrack, which, to its strength or otherwise. So this is really just... It's weird, because we have to put this in there, because it is kind of the final boss of RE7, but RE7 doesn't really have a final boss to me. It has more like an interactive cutscene. Like, it's not actually much of a boss fight, is it? Point, gun, shoot, win. So this is just more like cutscene music. It's got some cool stuff to it. I recently just re-listened to it today before we sat down to do this, and I hadn't heard it through headphones much before. And there's like a bunch of creepy whispering in that first movement I never noticed before. I was like, that's a really cool touch, considering you're sort of running up those stairs trying to face down Evelyn and stuff. So it's got stuff like that that's really cool, but it's not really a boss theme. So it doesn't really belong in that sense. I don't know. It's impossible to rank it with everything else, so it kind of just falls to the bottom. James, how do you feel about Daidara Bochi? However, I've butchered it.
I'm going to reference Aliens again, right? And I'm going to do that because there's a certain scene when they first go into the hive and there's a track playing. and it's very much like that squirreling kind of voices happening, like strings going on. This felt like a discovery track to me. It felt like you were discovering something terrifying, right? But you weren't. You already knew everything that was happening. You knew you were going to succeed because, like, the end of the game is literally just you shooting a blob in the face. You know, it didn't bring anything extra there. Like, yeah, there's... I don't know, because it seems to have everything that we're asking for.
Yeah.
Right? But it's arranged weirdly. And there is some tension there, but we know as the final, like, it's like it's trying to, it's like there's conflict within the game and the soundtrack and this track for me. Like, there's conflict there because, you know, like, it's trying to tell you, oh, you should be scared, but I'm not scared. I know what's happening. You know, I'm approaching this child. I'm going to stab her in the neck, and then, you know, it's
because a big tree woman thing,
right? Because there wasn't any agency given to you really to be scared, right? So yeah, for me, it's quite because of that, and because of the arguments you guys made. Actually, I'm going to actually put it down. I said low B, high C for me, like my original. But when I think about it, and I literally just listened to it 3 times because I couldn't remember. What it was precisely, and I think that's a real testament. So I think it's low, isn't it? It's low C for me at least.
Okay,
well, I'm happy for it to drag into a D. To be honest, if you put it there, Si, and you're
I'm happy with that too.
It's better than zeros?
No, it's sorry, it's better than zero. It's not that.
It is.
Not that bad.
Okay. That's fair. Okay, cool. Okay, so back to the remakes. Let's take a step back into Raccoon City for Resident Evil 2 Remake's final showdown track, which is called 5th Generation. James, how do you feel about the final boss of RE2 Remake?
They've taken huge inspiration from the original game, and they've just bumped it up. It feels like they've just kind of like added just extra to it, you know, and it feels like the original game. And it feels I don't have really much to add to it because it feels like the original game, but they've just modernized it for me, and it feels very, very epic and like scary at times too, and it's very long as well, which I appreciated. It just builds on the original track. It elevates like it to incredible heights for me personally. You just need to listen to this track. Everybody needs to listen to this track because I actually think. Like, now I've listened to it on its own, I appreciate it even more as well, because I've never listened to the track on its own. And
to be fair, that's something you could say about Remake 2's soundtrack, you know. I do say it all the time, it's because the game is not very good at sort of putting its soundtrack front and centre. It is worth seeking out tracks and listening to stuff, because you will get a different appreciation for it. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. Because I actually love this track so much. Actually, a few of these that are coming next, I put them into my D&D playlists. Like,
nice.
Because I have a bunch of D&D playlists for like Terror and Tense and Ominous. And these are perfect for that, you know, or chase music, you know. Resident Evil has so much of that. So I have put it as an S rank.
Wow. Okay, Sheldon, how do you feel about 5th Generation?
Very bold. So, simple thing, I prefer this to the original.
Okay.
Much more what James said it build. I think there's some really nice touches to this actually. There's a whole bunch of, well, they either are in the whispers in the mix or they just sound like whispers, but they're at the edge of hearing at various different stages on this track, and it's almost like the forgotten voices of Raccoon City are kind of like, you know, what's fading through or radio signals that are kind of crackling through something or whatever else. It's so smart. For me, this is the distillation of the best parts of what Resident Evil 2's, like, the original Resident Evil 2's kind of boss soundtrack sounded like. I don't think it's S tier, and I don't think it's A tier, but I do think it's a solid B. It's it's a good track. It's impressive considering how minimalist the rest of the Resident Evil 2 remake soundtrack is. I think, but yeah, I quite like this. It's not, it's something where, again, it's good. It doesn't overwhelm the senses. It doesn't try to steal the scene. It just literally is in the background and is appropriate. There's nothing to really love about it. In the grand scheme of things, there's nothing to really hate about it either. I think it's probably the best way of saying it for me.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, but I actually went kind of low on this compared to you guys, I guess, because I put this as sort of high C. I prefer the original, and again, I've said that there is definitely nostalgia baked into that. For me, I really like Resident Evil 2 Remake's boss themes overall. Like, where the soundtrack tends to be minimalist, it works really well because the boss themes just like ping in the opposite direction completely. And I really like all of them, and I love the fact that they kind of go through all, every stage of Birkin has its own unique theme, all 5 of them, and they all have fifth generation and third demise, they're all named appropriately and stuff like that. The only thing about this one though is that it sort of loses the leitmotif that you get from Resident Evil 2. I don't think it's in this, or if it is, it's very subtle, and that's been a reoccurring thing throughout Remake 2 that I really like, that they kept that around for the boss fights with the G. But now at this point, it's just noticeably absent, and that really hurts it for me, because it's sort of, you're right at the end of the game and you sort of lose some of those ties that you've had to everything else. But, I guess it depends what you want out of it. I can't really change that's my opinion on it. It's kind of low, sort of like maybe high C or whatever, low B. But yeah, we're gonna have to come to some kind of compromise.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could be swayed to that if I think about. I could be swayed to that, as in C is kind of, it does the job. Isn't anything spectacular. It just kind of does a job. I can happily put it in C.
You're putting it in the same rank as RE4.
As RE4. That's not. Yeah. I give you. Do you know what? I'll give you. It's definitely better.
And also, I know we have a lot of nostalgia here, right? But you're also, if you put it in B, low B, you're putting it behind RE1.
Yeah. Do you know what? Looking at what we've got out in front of us right now, not looking at the rankings that I gave it, it's definitely in a B at least. Maybe behind CV for me, but I could easily go either way if that's what your guys' preference is like.
I actually completely agree with you, because I prefer CV to this, actually. I bloody hate ranking.
Welcome to the show, James. I bloody hate it.
This is gonna get wild later on.
It's gonna get wild right now, I'm just telling you. Yeah. Okay, our next track, the next remake, Resident Evil 3 remake. The track is Metamorphosis. I'm going to jump right in again with this one. I said Final Metamorphosis from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was an S+. This is an S++. This is the top. This is number 1. This is it. Nothing's touching this. This is the best. This is the best track we got here. Easily for me. This is an example of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, there's so much about the remakes that switches stuff up, whether you like that or not. At least Remake 3 soundtracks had a load of these, like, hey, remember this track, City of Ruin and all that stuff. That's really cool. The final boss, they're just like, yeah, we're just going to modernize what we have, and it's going to be awesome. This is one of my favorite Resident Evil. It's my favorite final boss theme, possibly in the series. Possibly my favorite. I don't know. It was really high. I did the Remake 3 soundtrack ranking, and it's my favorite soundtrack of the remake sort of eras that we've been going through with 2, 3, and 4. And this track in particular is just up there amongst everything from that era. Again, Hollywood, but Resident Evil 3 Remake especially is an action film. So this is perfect for it, and it feels massive. Even if the boss, in terms of what you were saying earlier about sometimes a track and a boss can sort of drag each other down or upwards, I find the boss, Dark Souls Nemesis is, it's alright, but the boss makes it feel way more epic and way cooler than it legitimately is, because the music's great. Showing you let out a big laugh I saw there. How do you feel about Metamorphosis?
This is the worst track here.
No!
No,
is
Sherwin.
Yeah, I don't know if swearing's allowed on this, so feel free to bleep it in 3, 2, 1. This is the shit dance remix of Nemesis.
No!
I've got no other way to describe it. It is literally like the only thing that I liked about this is that slight electronica kind of vibe to it kind of fits your surroundings in the actual boss fight. Outside of that, I've just got a bunch of angrily scribbled notes as I just become more and more infuriated listening to this at the end. There's nothing scary about this. There's nothing urgent about this. There's nothing that doesn't make me just think it's blasting from like an... Joe, the best way of describing this isn't Resident Evil, this is House of the Dead.
That's incredible. I don't know how I cannot abide by that. Like, they barely changed it. They just modernized it and they went, do you know what, we'll put one new thing in. There's some piano, which is really cool.
It's just...
I can't. What?
They've added, like, it just feels so clumsy. Like, the way that it fits into what the old RE3 theme is, it takes all of the stuff that feels good and solid about RE3 Nemesis and just chucks it out of the window, and it's just like a clumsy reimagining of that. I've got no other way to describe it. It just doesn't... It doesn't have an urgency, it doesn't have a desperation, it doesn't sound like a last stand, it doesn't sound have any of that military tinge to it. It doesn't have any of the stuff we talked about that we like so much about RE3 that made us go, Joe, that's S rank across the board. This doesn't have any of that stuff. It just literally sounds like some kid came along with a crap pair of decks and just like threw that together. It's the Limp Bizkit of the Resident Evil soundtracks.
You know, if I didn't just have my underwear on right now, I'd be walking out.
James, how do you feel? How do you feel about Final
I can't believe you said that, show.
Yeah.
I gave you Resident Evil 5 is one of the best tracks here, and this is one of the worst.
No, I can't believe it. Like, this track is so epic. Like, and it fits.
Bad, yes.
No, it fits the epicness of the room you're in. Like, and it's like, you know. Like, the immediate thought, I'm going to put down, I'm going to let my emotions sit to the side for a second. My immediate thought when I listen to this is like, you know, this is it. We have to take Nemi. Like, it's, you know, we have to take him down. You know, it evokes a very powerful feeling inside me, like, when I was in that room. I am very biased, though. I really like Remake 3. Like, I like it more because everybody gets so upset about it. You know, so every time I hear, you know, people get mad about it, you know, it empowers, like, you know, I feel like this game has gone up many ratings just because people get so angry. But this track, like, is so good. Like, you know, you're running around, you're dodging Nemi, like, the beats they match that, like, you know, that's happening. You have a great amount of tension as well. Somehow, like, they've kept that in this track. Yeah, and it's a great arrangement as well. Like, it doesn't feel muddled up to me. Like a lot of the other stuff, they could have easily done that, like, with this track, but it doesn't. It feels within its time as well. Mm. Like the current kind of date it was set in, it feels like it could have been set in that time. Like, there are bits in it that they can go very, like, there's a bunch of moments where the trumpets go a bit crazy, you know, but I can forgive it that. There's these bits in it where there's crescendoing, like, kind of pianos going down and up while there's, like, and it just, when I was in that room and hearing that, I remember playing it for the first time, and, you know, when Jill grabs that weapon with the music happening in the background and you hear her line, there was nothing better for me. Yeah. Like, it was so epic.
Those piano moments as well. What's so good about this compared to the... And Sherwin, to your point about... I do agree that it does lose some of all those storytelling elements that are stacked on top of each other a little bit. But it's just... it's so undeniably epic for me. And what really saves it is after those piano runs, the melody just kicks back in again and just gets you again. Whereas on the original... It's really good from the off, but then it kind of just sort of like hits a bass line and just sort of rumbles along, which is good. But this one just swings back. It's like, you know, those balls on the string that you hit them and it comes back around, you hit it. It's like that. This theme is like that. It just keeps coming back around, smacking you in the face. Oh yeah, it's so good.
Do you know that the only safe way to resolve this is I can very respectfully understand that my opinion is dramatically different to yours, but I will step back from this, and you two decide where to put it.
I really don't want to put this in B. Like,
it's not B. It's not.
Ignore what I said. Clearly,
no, Showen, because
you're
showing you're valid in your bad opinion about this.
Yeah,
track.
but it's so jarringly. Yeah, but the difference is, it's so jarringly different. You can't average it out if you've got such a jarring opposition of opinion.
Yeah. My take is that right now I could say let's put it top of A, but by the end of it, I know I will be moving it into S.
Yeah, same.
So the question, I guess, is what comes? What do we put the original there that laid the groundwork for this version, whether you like it or not? Does that supersede it because of that, or do we just think this is more interesting? I could maybe argue it down that it's second because at least the original, it was very ahead of its time. You know, it feels like
there was a thing though. A family member said to me once, like that has stuck with me, even though I don't fully kind of agree with it. But they always say the original is better. You know, but there's only a certain few, like let's say films. There's only a certain few that are better than the original, like in terms of the sequel. Yeah. With this, I don't think that's true. I think the remake is better than the original.
So it's like Aliens.
Yeah, there's a third reference. I didn't even make it. It was shown.
Okay, well, do you know what? I'm not even going to argue at that point. Like, I tried, but it's top. It's top. Okay, cool.
I'll let you guys decide this one because I can't sensibly add to this dialogue. So,
I'm really.
Have you got an opinion about Remake 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I've got an opinion about all of these tracks.
Okay, I want to hear your opinion.
That one, I'm so starkly different to the pair of you that I feel like the safest option is just to go, do you know what, disconnect me completely from this.
Yeah, or else we're going to jump through Showen's screen.
Okay, I'm really interested to talk about the next one to see if we get a different dearth of opinion here, certainly. The next on our list is the most recent canonical entry in the series, Resident Evil Village with Eradicating Evil. James, you're a big fan of Resident Evil Village, so I'm going to go to you first. What do you think of the way that this game ends? Because giving you a hint now.
So this whole scene is high art to me. Like, the end of Village is high art, and the music, like, it fits that art so well. You know, there's a constant struggle, there's lows in the track that fit your own questions about whether you can take on Miranda or not. Like, there's little bits where it's just like, okay, we're going to give you a break, but you're not going to make this. Yeah, I felt that in the track, you know. And then it ramps up and fills you with, like, another sense of hope again, because the fight with Miranda is, it's not really a multi-tier boss fight, but there are different forms. Not really, but there are different stages, I guess, like, of her. Yeah, it's for me just looking at the boss fight and thinking how I don't know if anybody has watched my stream who's watching us, but like you should hear my reaction like to this, because my first reaction was I was blown away. You know, Miranda, when she spreads her wings and then the music starts, and then I died like 5 times and I didn't care because I got to see Miranda spread those wings 5 more times, you know, and then the music came on and I was like, yeah, this is another S rank for me. And it, like, for me, it's no question, but yeah, we'll see what you say.
I put this quite high up. I don't know if it's that high up, maybe low A or something like that, but I do really, really, really like it. I think the Resident Evil Village, this is probably like a tier death experience for another day, but Village's final boss is one of the best in the series, like, because the game is so well plotted in terms of being an action game and stuff like that, like the way that it ramps up to that. Even if Miranda isn't my favourite villain in the series by a long way, the boss just is so fun, and it feels so grand because of the music. Like, it's a perfect marriage of the music and the gameplay. It's just, it's so perfectly entwined, and the choir is used to great effect. Here, it feels like hope against all hopelessness, which is what you want out of a final boss fight. And despite the fact that we've done the choir a lot and we talked about the choir a lot across many of this, it being the focal point actually makes it feel like it's very different from what's come before in Resident Evil. It really stands out. It's very easy to conjure this in my mind immediately, those first few notes. So maybe it plays into what other games do a little bit, but for Resident Evil it really stands out. So for that reason, it comes straight to mind. It comes high up the tier for me. Sherwin, how do you feel about Eradicating Evil?
Yeah, let's go do it.
I was going to say, as a concept.
As a concept, sounds great. No, so I think... So it feels very Resident Evil. Occasionally it strays into sort of a Tim Burton-esque kind of place, which is kind of interesting. I think you could definitely tell listening to this that we are in a post Final Fantasy 15 Elden Ring world in terms of how the sound of this thing is. It sounds very much like, and that's probably the thing. It sounds very JRPG to me.
Yeah, sure.
But the biggest thing to take away from this, because you're right, James, it's a cool piece of music. I don't think there's anything wrong with it whatsoever. And I'm not even going to say it doesn't feel Resident Evil, because it does in places. It fits Resident Evil very well. The thing that the element I do feel that comes through with this is that it does feel very much. It feels like it's competing for the attention of the scene. Like, unlike all of the, in a similar sort of sense to what Code Veronica was, although not as overbearing as that by any stretch of the imagination, it is something where it almost feels like this wants to be the main focus of what's happening. Not the stuff on screen, not the boss, not anything else, is this. It's like, and I'm all there for a piece of music that is really well thought out and is spectacular. I mean, it's listening to the various different soundtracks over the years, over and over, for example, like some of the early ones, some of the really solid tracks from there, you do just listen to them and they go well above beyond kind of their original appearance, and I think this is the same sort of energy to it, which is good. So yeah, for me this is probably a B. With all that said, I don't think it's not up there with like the A's and S's, but it's a very solid, very respectable entry into B.
Okay.
Counterpoint.
Shoot.
Okay.
The scene is grand. Like, it's extremely grand. Extremely grand. I don't know what extremely that word is, but it's extremely grand, and I think like it warrants a big track. Like, I think
that's true.
I think because of that, it fits. Like, she is so big, and like she's so. You can imagine her being on a stage and singing, for instance. Like, I was kind of imagining, like, she had been
Speaking
doing...
of Parasite Eve.
Right, I imagine she was doing the vocals for it in a way, because she was such an arrogant person anyway. Like, even with her tragic backstory. Yeah,
there's something very pompous about this, because like the arena that you fight her in is like made of her own, like all kinds of like black goo and stuff. So it is very me, isn't it? So maybe it should be in your face.
Okay, I can see that. That's a reasonable point. Let's go around from that.
I would put it, looking at what we got now, I'd put it in A, somewhere near the bottom half of A. Either before, I'd put it at RE 5 personally, but I know I'm the sort of naysayer on that one, so I'm happy to put it at the bottom of A.
I'd say high B, bottom of A. I'm happy with either of those two for it.
James?
Oh, you guys decide, because I can't not put it anywhere but S for me. But again, there is a lot of bias there.
It's all right. We got time. Okay, our final track for this episode, the most recent, is Resident Evil 4 Remake, of course, with Origin of Tragedy. This one, I actually don't think I've ever heard this properly before, because the boss fight for me is usually ever pretty quick. For whatever reason, I take a rocket launcher in with me or whatever. Like, I haven't spent a whole lot of time doing that boss fight generally. And also, there's a lot going on that my attention isn't on the music, so hearing it in a vacuum was good to do. I prefer this over the original. There's still a lot going on here, but yeah, the sort of the structure of it is just better, and I don't know, something about the phrasing of it just works really well. Like, it fits Sadler a lot more than sort of like the swarm of bees noise that was the original RE4. Whereas this feels, and I just used the word pompous before, but it's a perfect word for Sadler, who sort of, maybe less so in the remake, it comes through, but in the original he sort of fancies himself a movie villain, doesn't he? He talks about the script and all that stuff. He's a nut job, is the point, I guess, as a cult leader. So it's fantastical and it suits that vibe. And again, in the vacuum, I was not expecting to hear harp strokes like that. I was really like, what the hell's going on? Yeah, it's all right. It's better than the original, which is good, because the original is right down there in C, looking all lonesome right now. It's not fantastic. It's decent. Sherwin, how do you feel about RE4 Remakes Final Boss?
Yeah, it's a definite B for me. It is better than the original. You said pompous. I wrote arrogant swagger. I think it's the same difference. It works very well. It's strangely uplifting, this track. Listening to it, but it's also at the same time. And here's the bad bits to it, I guess, and why I think it's a middle of the road kind of B territory. It doesn't really find its feet. Like you find yourself, and it's a very good analog to the boss fight. It takes so much time to get going that you finish the boss fight before it does. And listening to this, you're listening to it and you're like, it doesn't really have highs, it doesn't really have lows, it doesn't really drop into its groove, and then you get to like the sort of what I wrote down notes somewhere about the 2-3 minute mark or thereabouts, or whatever it is, and 2:30, something like that. And at that point, there it is, it's found it, but by that point it's too late because you stop listening. You kind of were listening. Okay, no, I don't care. And that's kind of and that's kind of where it found it. It's not like the massive build that happens in RE3 and then in RE3 Remake and then doesn't go anywhere. It's not that bad. It's like, it's just, I know I had to throw that in there. It's just it's basically, it just takes too long to do what it does, and I think that's a very good way of describing the boss fight as well, because you do get to the boss fight, and much like you, I didn't cheese it with anything. I just shot the crap out of it with a magnum. But the point is, even then, the boss fight was nothing. Like, it's just it's the easiest boss fight I think I may have experienced outside of Breath of the Wild. So it wasn't great.
Indeed. Yeah. James, how do you feel about Origin of Tragedy?
It's mid. We love saying that recently.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I don't...
Down with the kids.
Exact fellow kids. I don't think this adds much more to the original, personally. Like, I think there's a nice hook, as like Sherwin just said, like, there's a nice hook around 2:40, 3 minutes.
Goodness.
And it like kind of elevates it, but again, that's too late, and it makes it a little bit epic for, like, I don't know, 15 seconds. But the rest of the track, just feels very mid. It's also, this is going to sound strange coming from me, since I highly rated CV and stuff, but it feels very busy.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't hit the mark because of that. This track could have, and from the original as well, this track is a perfect example of something that could have elevated the fight, like to Sadler. In both examples, they haven't done that. They unfortunately didn't do that. I have put here low B, high C. For mine,
I could go with that.
Yeah,
I'm happy with that. That fits for me.
Yeah, my perfect placement is literally just above RE4, to be honest. So,
okay, let's do that. Because now the real fun part starts.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Okay, let's start from the bottom and go up to the top and see what gets shuffled around. So I think the first couple of questions are going to be fairly straightforward. Resident Evil 0, is it the worst thing on here? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Resident Evil 0.
But it's not, but it's okay because I can see this as a circle. The top again afterwards. So that's fine.
Okay. So Resident Evil 7. Is it... Well, actually, sorry, let me phrase this the right way. Is Resident Evil 4 better than Resident Evil 7? In this instance, yes.
Yeah.
By enough of a wide margin, I would say that cut-off between D and C is about right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I agree.
Obviously, we just don't need to ask the next question because we pretty much just all agree to it. The Remake 4 is better than RE4's final boss. So, is RE1 better than Remake 4, or did we get it right the first time?
Well, it's definitely better than RE. It feels like it's a tier above.
I think that's a good distinction as well. Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Okay. RE1, is it better than Resident Evil 6? That feels weird to say.
It just is. Yes. Again, I go back to RE6. We're on a boat. Like, it's kind of it's what my big letters and capital letters here are. It just is.
Fudge.
It's weird because I think it is, but I also think there's some stuff coming up that's worse than it. But that's just the reality of tier death experience.
Okay. Here's an interesting point. Because we said RE1 is such a hard one. Hear me out on this. Rather than let that pollute the rest of it, let us skip RE1 for the moment. Maybe return it to the bottom again for a moment, and then we can work out where all the others land, and then have the conversation of what RE1 lands at.
Yeah,
because that's awkward and it pollutes things. By nature, what it could bear in mind, we talked about it being a low A to a high B, and it already then kind of lived. Don't put it in the D. It doesn't belong there. It's not behind R0. Oh, could it not go back after?
There's no extra. I can't make an additional tier.
Okay,
now.
fair enough. So, but we talked about it being like the most
there.
The awkward one of the bunch. So let us not interfere with all the rest. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
It's the gun survivor.
Yeah.
Not this again.
Old memes.
It's the Edward. If you go back to the thing, the last time we did this, it's the Edward Dewey.
Yeah, there's always one, isn't there? Okay, Resident Evil 6. Is it better than Resident Evil 2 Remake's final boss theme? I actually,
I don't.
They're much of a muchness for me, so I can actually go either way with it now. I think.
If you were going to go with the thing you had before for RE3, the failed attempt to kind of drop it below RE3 Nemesis, where it's RE2 is because it's effectively influenced by rather than an original track, RE6 would go above it, but I have no horse in this race, so I don't care. So, James,
I think it's basically down to you.
I don't know. We'll keep it where it is.
Okay.
Can we introduce like a phone a friend to like call Steve to like decide
I like no. Steve is a bad one for us.
Yeah, you need to find someone very opinionated.
We don't want Steve here.
Okay, RE2 Remake final boss. Is it better than Code Veronica's final boss? I'm going to say no. I think we've got it right.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's not better than Code. Sure, I can see the argument. I think Code Veronica is too high here, but at the same time, I can respect where you guys are coming from, and it's interesting in the sense that even just now we've hovered over it, I can already hear a wailing away in my head. So that means there's something permanent to it. That at least, even if it is quite irritating during the actual fight, it means there's something about it that's quite hooky, which I couldn't say for RE2 Remake. So that's enough for me to agree there.
Okay. Speaking of wailing away, Code Veronica, is it better than Village? And is the distinction big enough there for the separation of tiers?
Yes.
Yeah, it's where. Yeah. Now there's where the fun begins, everybody.
Oh, God. Village, final boss. Is it better than Resident Evil 5? For me, yes.
Nope.
Sorry, Shona. I think you lose the Democratic race there.
I do. Resident Evil 5, I can see the logic of why. Resident Evil 5 is absolutely brilliant piece of music, but you do have to ultimately just land it with the point of it probably, as we said before, is the kid at the gig that doesn't really belong there. He's just he's heard the single and checked out, doesn't know what the album is. He'll buy a t-shirt and then never wear it.
Yep.
That's kind of it.
Okay.
Should we do CVE and RE5?
I was just going to ask that question, but I think... Oh, you know what? For me, Code Veronica is better.
That's what I'm thinking now. I'm like... Yeah, I think they should swap.
Okay. Here's a different thing. I see where you guys are coming from. And I can actually accept where you... And I understand, because I do think Code Veronica fits the game more, if that makes sense.
Mm.
But does that mean that we actually drop RE5 down a tier? Because we did say that Code Veronica to RE8 did feel like it's a tier step upwards, which I can understand and appreciate. So do we by nature therefore drop RE5 down to B and then put Code Veronica in front of it?
That's a great point. I think we put CV. I think we keep RE5 up there, but we put CV in A, but we put CV in front of RE5.
I think we put RE5 in B behind our Code Veronica.
Okay. I would agree. I think I agree with that if we're going to do it. Yeah, that looks right to me.
Because again, RE5 is absolutely brilliant, but there's only so high it can rise without the fact that it isn't. Yeah, that it's just a piece of. It's an Indiana Jones movie. It's not a Resident Evil game.
Yeah. Okay.
I should stress a good Indiana Jones movie. It's not Crystal Skull. Let's not go
there. Important distinction. Village, is it better than Remake 1? That's a tough one.
Really
That's
is.
a toughie.
I've played those for the rest of this and succeeded so much. Please let me have this one.
I think we've got it the right way around. Yeah,
So I'm gonna try and convince myself.
Close.
Right. So when I look at both of them, when I look at both of these tracks, I think they both perfectly fit, like, the scenes that they're trying to set.
Very true.
Like, I
suppose
that makes them, and that's coming a lot from. I wanted to put this in S, like, but yeah, when I look at remake, and I look at reimagining. I don't like the word remake. Everyone gets mad about it, but
Reloaded.
Yeah, yeah. Revelations.
Resident Evil Revolutions.
Yeah, when I look at it, like, yeah, Remake did a great job of setting the scene with that music, and for its scene, and RE8 did a fantastic job of doing that too.
Here's one maybe to help sort of make your mind up then, is that Village, it's a great piece of music, but as we said, it sounds like a JRPG. It sounds like it could be this or that. There are a lot of things that it takes influence from. Remake, other than the original RE1, it still sounds like nothing else. Like, there is no other game that it could possibly be.
Really, really, really good point.
And it's a great point about the original RE1 as well, that it was just so unique. It sounds like nothing else. It still sounds like nothing else. That's why I love it so much, because it's so bloody weird. And again, same thing with the Remake. Even though they changed the instrumentation to something more cinematic, it still doesn't sound like any other series. So it gets big old merit points for that, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we'll just keep it where it is then. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
James. Appreciate
Remake.
your suffering.
Yeah, thanks, James. Remake 1 is it better than RE2? No, RE2 for me is, I think top of A is as far down as I could never let it go.
I don't put it above. I put RE1 above RE2. I think RE1 doesn't do anything to make me disconnect from what's happening, from the actual bit. And right from the start, the opera wail is enough for me just to go, do you know what? This immediately disconnects me straight away. First thing I listen.
We're learning that Sherwin doesn't like choirs. That's what.
Yeah, I think they fit in their own way. Like, I think it just doesn't really fit. And again, I understand the logic. Like, again, it's the G virus coursing through Birkin's body and making him go absolutely crazy, and everything else is uncontrollable, right? I get it. But I just don't think RE1 ever puts a step wrong whatsoever, whereas I think RE5, for all of its big sound, its presence... RE2, for its big sound and presence and everything else, I think it doesn't feel immediately evocative of that scene. Like, you could have other music there and it would feel appropriate. Like, if you were to take this away and put something else, you could happily take this away and put something else there. Whereas RE1, that feels like that's made to be on that helipad. I don't know any other piece of music that could encapsulate that moment as well as that.
James, how are you feeling?
I almost had you there, Si.
Yeah, you actually almost did, you know. You're making a very good point.
So I've just listened.
That's why I was like, do you know what? Let's go to someone else.
I've just listened to both of them again, because as soon as you said Remake and RE2, I want to put Remake into RE2. Because, and I'm going back. I'm going back to what I said way earlier. It's the uniqueness of the track. Like, it's the spideriness. It's the creepy undertones of the entire track. There's something that hasn't been done again. You know, whereas I love the RE2 track, right? But yeah, it is very busy, and it's very loud. So yeah, I would put RE, the Reimagining Revolution Retrograde,
Reloaded, Retrograde
in front of RE2.
I tell you what, I'm trying to think of the other boss themes in Remake 1, and there are some that are, you know, decent, but I think the final boss is absolutely the best one. Whereas, and this is me just justifying it to myself, basically, but I think that second Malformation is probably better than third Malformation and RE2. I don't think it's the best boss theme, the final boss theme. So I'm making peace with it. But I've already lost because you guys have decided that. So, do you know what? That's fine. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
So the question is now: is RE8 James? Is RE8 better than RE2? I agree with you.
Yes.
It is much better. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. My plan is coming to fruition.
My plans are crumbling before my eyes.
No, that's mean. I couldn't do that to you, so that's just too mean.
Yeah, I mean,
I could see.
You
I can see an
absolutely can.
argument
That's
for
how
it.
the show works.
I don't rate RE8 above RE2. Like I don't think RE2. I mean, for me, both of these could happily drop down into B, but then I think they would be in the correct place for them to be at that point. In B, so I'm good at that. However, James, over to you.
1 second, I'm listening to them both again. Quickly, real quick.
Oh boy,
Because
I don't think.
it's such a cleaner. RE8 is such a cleaner track.
Well, yeah, because it's got 20 years of musical experience.
So?
On it. It's got like
So it's
stereoscopic 3D audio or whatever they call it these days.
So like it's you know it's got the professional cleaner.
Also, do you know what Village has is basically just it's all one thing. Not that that's wrong, but Remake RE2 has horns and choir and all kinds of stuff going on, whereas Village, for all of its positives, keep yourself rather constrained to choir and stuff like that. RE2 is going to sound like a lot going on, because there is. It fits the boss that's falling apart before your eyes.
But so does RE8.
And they both fit their games. I'm absolutely not discounting that. Yeah.
There's
RE2 is just more
one way to
interesting.
do this. I'm going to roll dice and see what my opinion is.
I'm gonna roll my blank dice. I'll see what happens.
1, 2, 3. I'm not going to roll the D5 I was talking about earlier. 1, 2, 3. It's RE2. 4,
So
5,
it's come
6
to
is
this.
RE8. RE8. It's a 5.
Oh my god. Do you know what?
Every single TDE that we've done that I've been a part of, I've always got Village and I've always got these ones as high as I can. I will fight for them. But
Okay.
I do think it's very close. I do think it's very close.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess
Before no, go on, side. Go on.
I was just about to say probably what I think what you're about to say is that maybe now it's time to drop the original RE1 in and see where it lands.
Yeah, I was going to say I think all of us can agree that RE3 is a tier above RE1 remake.
Yeah.
James?
Muted.
Oh.
Say that again.
RE1 remake, reload, however you want to describe it, is like RE3 Nemesis is a tier above that.
You think that Remake is above
No. I think RE3
How it is now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's the
Which case,
distinction.
exactly where Si was going from. I think now we have the point where we can appropriately drop in RE1 if that's our considered system.
Okay, yeah.
So, again, for me, I'm just going to start right out of the gate. I prefer the original. I do prefer the original over Remake 1.
So you think it's top of A?
No, I don't, because RE2 should be at least top of A. But
Okay, sorry. So you think it's an A?
It's definitely an A at this point. I think it belongs amongst that company. But where exactly? Yeah, it's down to all of us to decide.
I can hear.
I
can
definitely
hear
agree
Steve
there.
screaming. Like he's screaming from his place of work right now.
Sherwin, where would you put it?
I would put it behind RE1 remake. Ahead of RE8.
Okay. James?
What are my opinions about this game?
It's got Rebecca
good.
in it. It's got Rebecca in it.
It's got Rebecca in it.
Which for listeners, that's slightly weird if you don't know James actually, because that just sounds like a completely random.
It's got
reference.
Rebecca in it. Yeah, I like Rebecca. Everybody. So I said it. So this game, this track, I said there was something missing from it, and I said that basically Resident Evil 3 added that. I know we've already, I think that Resident Evil Remake has that something.
Okay.
I think Resident Evil Village is perfect for its scene, and the boss fight. I think it's in a pretty good place there. RE2 with how chaotic that scene is, and you get that through the track. Because of that, like I think they all kind of fit, whereas Resident Evil is kind of missing something. So I don't want to. I think it's iconic, right? I do not think it should go in B, but I think it should be in low A.
So bottom of A.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see that working because RE1 is like that strange prog album that the band released, and then no one really, like it's hard to understand and everything else, and it is a hard listen, but you're listening to genius. I could see that. I could see that dropping in, and I still feel quite bad for sabotaging RE2 for Sai. So I can happily see it dropping in at the bottom of A. It's definitely a head and shoulders above the tracks in B. I can see it there. What about you, Sai?
You see Sai pouting. He's pouting so hard.
It's so hard. Because
I gave you RE3 Remake, Sai.
I know, that's the problem, right? That's the problem. Because for me, this is, as I say, this should be arguably top of A, but also RE2 should supersede it. So I don't know, it's a weird, confusing thing. I think I'm just going to have to settle with that. Because it's definitely not better than RE2 for me. So,
that's like a barrier, it can't go any further.
No, Village is not better than RE2, but I just have to live with it. It's great, okay. But
do you think it's better than RE8?
What, Resident Evil 2?
No, Resident Evil 1.
No.
You don't think it's better than RE8?
Wait. Yes, it is.
You
but
don't. Yeah.
wait.
I also agree. I also agree with that point.
Damn it.
Wait, you think
but the problem is it's better than RE8, but it's not better than RE2. That's the problem.
Wait, so you think RE1 is better than RE8?
Yeah.
No.
I think for exactly the same as what you just argued. I think RE8 has so many tools at its disposal to make to make itself happen and to be evocative and all that. And RE1 achieves a similar thing with so much less. That's what makes it so brilliant.
I don't know. I don't know if we should be.
Oh, no.
I'm actually coming around to RE2 being higher than RE8 again.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
No,
right?
show it. What do I need to get you?
I'll do a deal. I'll do you a deal. If we put RE1 there, RE2,
I can do that.
It goes just below it. Is that fair?
Can do that.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't like this.
Conniving, the secret weapon. Okay.
James, good government is all about debate and making concessions. I am very, very deeply upset that the very top track on this, which I know is going to stay there, is not in the absolute bottom of it. So, it's small victories, my friend.
No, honestly, I'm happy that RE isn't A at all. So
that is true.
I thought you guys were just going to say D. To be honest,
nah, it's great. It definitely belongs in A.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I suppose that's really it, because as we said, the distinction between RE3 Nemesis and Remake 1 is clear enough, and Sherwin has really just thrown his cards on the table and walked away from it when it comes to Remake 3.
Sometimes you have to understand. Yeah, I am the 48%, you are the 52%. It's just what it is. That's it.
Yeah, Brexit.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So that is our ranking of the mainline final boss themes from Resident Evil. If you like this episode, do let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see us do this with all the rest of the games in the series, because there is a lot more to dig into there as well. That'd be a wild and wacky episode. And any other episodes of Tier Death Experience that you might want to see, let us know of any suggestions. Of course, make sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube, and you can support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Various tiers will get you shows early, including Tier Death Experience if you back us back us, blah, 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 get the words out, back us at, I believe it's $8 a month. But that means you get everything early. James, thank you for joining me for your first time to talk about Resident Evil music.
Yay.
Did you enjoy yourself? I was bullying you at the end there.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm not mad or anything. No, I'm fine. I love TDs. They're super fun. And I thought if I was going to introduce myself to the music side of things, I think TD was probably a great
Jump right into the chaos.
way to do it. Yeah, I tend to do that. I tend to jump right into the thick of it whenever I do anything. So, yeah, it was fun.
Cool. Sherwin, as a pleasure always to talk about Resident Evil and Resident Evil music with you.
Yep, thank you for having me. I'm the opposite of James. I don't do TDEs very often, so thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. And thank you for watching this episode. And of course, have a good week.